I wanted to clarify something. That halacha we saw beginning of Hilchos Beis Bechira, right at the beginning, a little bit out that we don't build the Beis Mikdash at night. I have the source here. I took it from the edition, the Frankel edition of the Rambam, because he has all the Mefarshim there. So it's good to go into it a little bit. We should say everything. So I'm going to share it on the screen. Okay. Okay. No, this is the Mari Korkus. I want the other one. We're going to start with the Radbaz. Okay. Do you guys have Radbazes there? This it? It keeps giving me the wrong page. Okay, here it is. This is the correct page. Okay. So first, let's see some notes here. The first is that it says we don't build Oskim Bator Binyan Beis Hamikdash. Let me open up my Rambam. First, Hilchos Beis Bechira, the first perek, and Yud Beis. Ein Bonei Hamikdash Balayla. We mentioned this before in last week, so now we're going to see this inside. It says Ein Bonei Hamikdash Balayla. Shneimar V'yom Hakim Hamishkan. It says on the day that Moses set up the temple, or the day that the Mishkan was set up. That's the introduction to the tribute that each of the tribal leaders brought during the Hanukkah, right? Good. And it says, B'yom hakimim Mishkan, B'yom hakimim v'lo b'layla. You set up the Mishkan, and the Mishkan is basically extended. If you were to build a Mishkan, but you'd make it much more permanent and just invest a lot in the structure, you'd get a Mikdash, right? That's basically what it was. Herod basically just went all out, and the future temple they're probably going to make bigger and better, and also go all out, God willing. Okay. And we busy ourselves with the construction of the temple from dawn until Tzeis. And I mentioned that this Tzeis is the later Tzeis. This is the only time in the Rambam, to my knowledge, that the Rambam, when he mentioned Seder Kochavim, is referring to what's known as the second Tzeis. Why? Because we mentioned before. There's two of this times mentioned in Shas, at least according to the Rambam's resolution of them. The first is basically 3/4 of a mil walk after sunset, like the Rambam says explicitly. That basically comes out to 18 minutes by his count. And that's with regards to the halachas of letting out Shabbos and the Kriya Shema and Tariv Shemesh. But here it's talking about the tzeis that corresponds to Alos. Just like Alos is 4-meal walk or whatever it is, a very long time, more than an hour before sunrise, so too this tzeis, when it gets fully dark, that's the well more than an hour after sunset. Okay. So we have to say something here. It then says, Ve'ein binyan mikdash doche yom tov. He also mentions, everybody has to help. That means if Beis Hamikdash building time is happening, so all the men and women have to help during the day, right? You can't say, for example, I have a learning seder. Right? Time to study Torah. So you don't do that. But, like we saw in Hilchos Talmud Torah, children still go to school, and the Malamed is still with them. So everybody has a command, by the way. All of us are commanded, we have to study Torah day and night, correct? And we have to train children to do that. Children should have day Seder and night Seder. The Rambam paskin that. And the Rambam says here that even though the men are supposed to be involved in building the Beis Hamikdash, basically at night, remember, what's the verb, the shorish that we use to study Torah? Ayin Samit Kuf. Yeah, it's asek. So what are you going to Bima atamit asek? What do you busy yourself with? Torah study or building Beis Hamikdash? So in certain cases, building Beis Hamikdash overrides it. Regarding who? Men during the day. But at night there is no Beis Hamikdash to busy oneself. Instead, that's when you're supposed to learn Torah. Because if you say you build the Beis Hamikdash at night and during the day also, so you would never have a time when men could study. And the children, of course, they study during the day and at night. Their Torah study is not affected by building temple. And that says binyan mikdash doche yom tov. And the building of the temple does not override Yom Tov. And they say, of course, Shabbos also. And that's in the Medrash a few times in the Gemara, that the whole din of Shabbos, Rashi brings us in the two places. It said, when Moses received the commandment to build the Mishkan, the last thing was told, Aches Shabbos Tishmoru. But don't forget, keep your Shabbos. All these malachas that you have to do not override the Sabbath. And so too, when he came down from the mountain, this is why Akil Moshe called off Israel. He gathered them all together. And he said, don't forget, you could work for 6 days, but keep the Shabbos. Now here's Binyan Beis HaMikdash as a mitzvah. Why? To teach them that the Shabbos is not overridden by building the Beis HaMikdash. Yes, once you have a Mikdash, you will perform the service even on Shabbos, even on Yom Tov, even if the service is involving many forbidden labors. But your forbidden labor shall not override the Sabbath when you're just building the temple. And now this is an important difference. Shabbos and Yom Tov, you can't say, oh, I'll do a little bit for the Beis HaMikdash. You can't. It's forbidden. Okay? It's an isser. A person who does malacha for building the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos is to be stoned. He's doing malacha. Here, when it says we don't build a Beis HaMikdash tonight, it's not a prohibition. It's telling you when the right time to build it is. It's telling you about priorities. And that's why Rambam connects it to first men and women have to do it. And don't forget, don't take away Talmud Torah from the children. That's the first thing we should notice by this. Okay? So building Beis HaMikdash is sometimes for day and for men, something we do instead of Torah study. Okay, that's the first thing. And by the way, this harks back to I'm wondering why this isn't here. Okay, Joshua meeting the angel. Remember what it says? What does Chazal say in Megillah 3, the third page, right there at the beginning of the Sefer Megillah? Mm-hmm. It says that Joshua was getting ready to besiege Jericho. Right, that was the first battle they're going to have when they crossed the Jordan River. First, they crossed the river. Within a matter of days, they were all circumcised and they kept the Passover and they started eating from real grain instead of mun. And then they're getting ready to attack Jericho, right? And Joshua was outside Jericho. It says at that time he encountered a man. What? No, he wasn't. Jericho means surrounding Jericho. It means he was at that area, like greater the Jericho metropolitan area. Okay, and that says Jericho Sogaret Sugaret. Jericho was still sealed up. They're ready for the siege. You want to see it? Yeah, but it's enough right here. Go ahead. It's Joshua 5, whatever it is. So, where what? Yeah, well, okay. Wow, it could be 6. I don't remember the chapters so well. The point is, this is before the march around Jericho. And it says that the angel told him, "What? Take off your shoes." Now, one of the conversation he had with this angel was, he sees this man, this vision. Angels appear as men, right? To all the prophets, the angels appear as men. To Abraham, what do you see? Angels came to visit Abraham. What did he see? Shlosha Nashim. And Ezekiel, Zechariah, we just mentioned them. They see what? Men, right? But men who stay still. Either way, this angel appears, and it says he has his sword drawn. So Joshua realized that he asked him, are you friend or foe? Are you here to punish us, or are you here to help us? And what was the angel's message? You have it open there? You found it? Should I get it? Okay, so should we wait, or should I? The point is that what did Joshua say to him? He said, I'm here to help you, basically. But it was sort of a threatening. Yeshua had a suffix because he sees this angel, he has his sword drawn. Maybe he's coming to reprimand the people, or perhaps even punish them for something they've done wrong. And the sages say, yes, it's true, even though the angel does tell him, yes, I am the captain of God's hosts. I'm basically the general of the godly army that's supposed to be fighting, really doing the real battle for you. Why? Who knocked down the wall? The wall of Jericho. Who knocked it down? They just marched around, sounded the shofar. They did it 7 times on the Shabbos day, 7 hakafas, and the wall fell. Who did it? Yeah, must have been God's, this army that he sent. Okay, so the general of God's army comes and shows up and just tells him, here's the message. The place where you're standing is holy. Take off your shoes. That's the end of the message. So Chazal filled the blank over here. It says here that basically he came to reprimand them that they had been neglectful. I have the whole Gemara here, but it's a little bit too long for our purposes right now. It says, when Joshua was outside Jericho, he lifted up his eyes. He saw a man, Omed Lenegdo. He saw a man standing against him. Like I said, it was sort of threatening. And then the Gemara takes a side point and says that he bowed down to this angel and spoke to him. How do you know it's an angel? Maybe it's a mazik, one of the mazikin, some sort of demon of destruction. And it says no, he couldn't. He said Hashem's name. They don't say these things in vain. They don't lie. Okay, maybe it's lying. No, they don't lie. Okay. Amar lo emesh bitaltem tamid shel ben arbaim. The angel came to tell him, did you know, for whatever reason, you missed yesterday's mincha, the lamb that you're supposed to offer in the Mishkan in the afternoon? You missed it for whatever reason. Okay. V'achshav bitaltem Talmud Torah, and tonight you're not studying Torah. What mitzvah? What general mitzvah was Yeshua involved in right now? By the way, yeah, it says the three mitzvahs you have to do in order are appoint a king, get rid of Amalek, right, and then build the base of Mikdash. Appointing a king and getting rid of Amalek, it basically means also get rid of your threats. Okay? Get rid of the threats around you. That's part of conquering land. And like the Rambam says, conquering the land itself is something you have to do. It's ein melech nilcham tchila. He first has to conquer the land, right? That's Joshua's job. He's God's appointed king, according to the Rambam. So he basically is involved in this big mitzvah of what? Kibush haaretz. That's what he's doing. He's doing basic milchemetz mitzvah. That everything that has been since the Torah is given, and even before this, they're finally going through with God's plan. They're about to start the war to conquer land. Why? Like we read last week, or the people of Chutzlaretz are going to be reading this week. God intended for the Israelites to leave Egypt and begin the conquest of the land of Canaan, and they're about to start doing it. Finally, getting to the part. This is where it's supposed to be. And by the way, the base of Mikdash is not really there now. Now the Mishkan is sitting where? In Gilgal. So it's not considered Menucha or Nachala, and the camp doesn't exist anymore, technically speaking. The Bamas are permitted. They're only going to accomplish this new mitzvah of Binyan Beis Hamikdash. They already set up the Mishkan before. Now they will have, once they finish all these wars, it will be incumbent upon them to what? Set up the Mishkan where God wants. They're going to have to go to the Menucha, the place that God will show them, put the Mishkan here, and then all the mitzvahs will come into force. They still haven't achieved that part, Binyan Beis Hamikdash. So the Malach told them that basically you neglected night Seder. That's what their reprimand was. Amar lo aleza mehan bata. So Yeshua said, so which of Avera was worse? Why you come now to reprimand me? So he says, Amar lo atabati. I have come now. It's one thing to miss the Korban Tamid in the afternoon. Avar smano batel korbano, but you're missing night Seder. Okay. Amar lo miyad. So then it says in the pasuk, even though it's not exactly miyad, Vayolan Yeshua balaylahu betocha emek. Okay. That night, Joshua stayed overnight in where? In the Emek, in the valley. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Malamit Shalon be'omka shalacha. Rabbi Yochanan says it means he was staying overnight in the Omka Shel Torah, the depths of the Torah. Rashi adds, Lo botha laila k'tiv. Doesn't really say that. Wasn't that in very night, because that pasuk is taken from somewhere late in the Sefer. Elo l'balesh etzar al ha'ai. The night that they were besieging Ai, even though they started besieging the city. V'achi kamar. Here's what it means. Miad chazar Yoshua b'dvarav. He realized his mistake when they first set siege to Jericho. Why is Jericho all closed up? Because they see, oh my God, a gigantic Israelite army of 600,000 men is basically encamping around the city. So that's already basically the beginning of the siege. It's like they're going to start opening up the doors for them. So Yeshua did not like he did before. Next time they had a siege beginning around the city, that night they involve themselves in Torah. Why? During the day they make war, and at night they're not supposed to be doing Milchemes Mitzvah. Instead, that's when they're supposed to be learning Torah. So too, the point that I'm trying to make is that this din about not building the base of Mikdash at night is not about Isser V'Heter. On Shabbos, it's a din of Isser V'Heter. You're not allowed to do Malacha on Shabbos for building the base of Mikdash. But base of Mikdash at night is not because there's some prohibition that if you would build the base of Mikdash at night, you will get lashed or something like that. It's that you are not supposed to, because you have to be studying Torah at that time. Which means that really you work just like war and travel and other things that you do by day, you do as long as there's still a little bit of sunlight. Look outside right now. The sunset, what? Oh, the Arabs are just about making noise. We're just a few minutes after sunset right now. It's still quite light out. So normally, the line between night and day is Shkia, right? But for this din, you continue working and building the base of Mikdash, just like Nehemiah did, building the walls of Jerusalem until it's really Tzeisach Chochavim, until it's really dark out, because you can still get things done. But you eventually have to realize it's dark out. Go learn some Torah. Next, let's see what the Rabbaz says. Who wants to look at this? This is interesting, Rabbaz, because the Rabbaz says something that's not exactly fitting with everything we've seen in the Rambam until this point. You have it there? Bonim et hamikdash umistabra li. We're reading the Shivish. Davka mishar nikanor v'lifnim shenikra mikdash ein bonin elabayom. It seems to me that this rule that we only build the base of Mikdash by day and not at night is referring to within Shar Nikanor. That's the gate between the second courtyard, the women's courtyard, the outer courtyard, and the inner courtyard. Why? Because only that which is within Shar Nikanor is called Mikdash. Is that Rambam's strict definition? We saw that, yes, the Rambam right at the beginning of this chapter defined Mikdash as a structure over here, surrounded by an Azara, with a Mizbeach right there in the courtyard in front of the entrance. It's oriented east to west, and there's certain kelim that you have. That's the minimum, like the Mishkan. But then the Rambam says throughout this book, like we saw before, was it 10 examples of how Rambam says that Mikdash means what? Well, that's in the Mishnah. That's for certain Dina. But in this particular book, he means all of Har HaBayis. Okay? Mikdash is Har HaBayis. So I don't know if this diuk is particularly good in the Rambam, because even though the Rambam said base of Mikdash is minimally one chutzner, and that's it, and everything else is just addition, the Rambam then says many other places that they eventually added. Already, we saw the Rambam mentions in Parashah Mishnayos that there's a chatzer chadashah of Beis Hashem in Yoshafat's time. That's what's called the women's courtyard. It already added a second courtyard, and that is 100% Mikdash. It's called in Beis Hashem. So I don't know if this diuk is exactly the Rambam. And he continues, Aval har bayit shehu keneged machne levia bonina filu balayla. Everywhere else in Har HaBayis, which is machne levia, in the desert was beyond. That's different rules entirely. So you could build there at night. I don't know if that's really, because like I said, there are many places we're going to see, and we have seen where the Rambam considers all of machne levia, all of Har HaBayis, to be mikdash, especially where Rambam says in his classical letter, and I went to the base of Mikdash and I davened there. Rambam did not enter Machane Shechina. He did not enter the actual Azar. He didn't even enter the Ezras Nashim. He was in what's called Machane Levia, and he referred to that as the base of Mikdash. And when he says in the Halacha, he said the base of Mikdash is in ruins, unfortunately, in our days. But all the mitzvahs still apply, especially the mitzvahs of reverence of the temple. And what is the reverence of the temple nowadays? Can't stress this enough. He says, don't go to the places you're forbidden, and do go to the places where you are allowed. Where are you allowed in the temple nowadays? In all of basically what we know as Machane Levia, or most of what's Machane Levia. So the Rambam calls that Mikdash. So I don't know if this is a perfect diuk in the Rambam. And it says, Ukra Misayali. I bring a pasuk to back up what I'm saying. Dichtiv biyom akimet hamishkan v'lo chatzar ol moed. It says the day he set up the Mishkan and not the chatzar of ol moed. That wasn't set up. Yeah, it's true in the pasuk in that the Rambam brings from Bamidbar, it just says biyom akimet hamishkan. So that might just be referring to the actual tentative meeting structure, correct? But the problem is, you look in Shmos where it gives all the details. It says everything that Moshe Rabbeinu did, and one of the psukim says what? Exodus 4:33 says, "Vayakim et hechatzer saviv lamishkan v'mizbeach," and he set up the chatzar around the mishkan and the mizbeach. Moses did that also that very day. So that's not like the Radbaz. Okay, because the Rambam says, it's only referring to the Mishkan, v'lo chatzar ol moed. But the problem is, there's another pasuk that says they did put up what's called the chatzar ol moed. So I'm not, like I said, the Rambaz is entitled to this. I just don't think it fits with what we've seen in the Rambam. And he continues, Vein tashber. What's tashber? I'm going to share the next thing on the screen with everybody. Tashber is Rashi Tevos, Tino Kot Shel Beit Rabban. The rabbi pointed out just yesterday that Tino Kot in Mishneh Hebrew doesn't mean babies all the time. What does it mean? It's children. Okay, so children of Beit Rabban, children in the schoolhouse. That's basically what it is. Okay? Tino Kot, a Tino means a child, younger than Bas Mitzvah. He says here, Zepashut Parakamad Megillah, Mashmat Vatlin Talmud Torah, living on Beit HaMikdash. See, we override, or what's Mivatlin? We ignore Talmud Torah in order to build a temple. They're both positive commandments, right? Positive command to study Torah. It's also referring to Shema. And it's a positive command to build a temple. The temple is built by the day, so Talmud Torah is for night. We split the two. Even though the Torah is supposed to be day and night, so maybe I would imagine, by the way, when they begin to construct the temple, there are many people who are going to claim an exemption from having to be involved in it. Why? Because there's Talmud Torah, just like there are many people who claim that they have an exemption from, let's say, serving in the army on behalf of Klal Yisrael because they're busy studying Torah. Now, you and I know that on the face of it, that's not a valid claim. The reason why, let's say, people do have the right to say, you know what, I'm not going to enlist in the current incarnation of a Jewish army is because they don't need you. If there was a real Nochemis mitzvah and a need for every able-bodied man to serve, then no one would be able to say, excuse me, I want to study Torah. I'm one of the Asar Batlonim in the city, or I dress a certain way, and therefore I should be exempt from serving. The reason many of us have an exemption from serving in the current army is simply there is no need for us, and it's just a waste of time. They have too much manpower. They have so much wasted manpower. Even girls, what do they do in the army? Yeah, they have so much. They have people, they don't know what job to give them, and Chas v'shalom, even worse is if there's actual combat, perhaps they use their soldiers wrongly. They put them into harm's way instead of, let's say, just blowing something up from far away. Like many of my former students said, they were in a tank. They were somewhere in Gaza, and they could just press a button and cannon fire would just destroy what's in front of them. But instead, they say, no, there's a Tohar Neshek and other such pagan nonsense, and they have to endanger their own lives and actually go in there. Nonsense. We don't need so many people in the army. That's why you and I are putter, not because there's an actual tour for people to study Torah. That's nonsense. Doesn't fit with the Torah. Okay. It says here, the Gisa Boba of Laila, Ikaman Desfirle, Divikriyashma Yatsa. Okay? I think that's what it says there. It's a little bit, I have the photocopy, it's bent over there. It's like close to the margin. So it says that someone could say, well, I'm supposed to study Torah even during the day, so I'm putter from building Beis HaMikdash. The answer is, you read Shema in the morning, you've already done Kriyas Shema. That was good enough. You did your Yotzei Yedei Chova. You discharged your minimum obligation. Now go help build the temple. V'gisa bo yom v'layla v'efshar yaharher b'libo v'hu omeid uvoneh. And another thing you could do is, think Torah thoughts as you're laying bricks. Nowadays it's even easier. What we could do is have an actual Magid cheer there on a megaphone, telling people stuff, or just do what we do around the house. You have a radio or a phone. So what you do is you go to the Machon Shilo YouTube channel. They now have two of them, and you play a shear in the background while you're, making sandwiches for your children so they can go to school tomorrow while you're away, studying. Right? That's what you're supposed to do. Okay, so it's something that's possible. He also says, Rabbeinu said in Hilchos Talmud Torah, I just mentioned this, that he's talking about the Rambam. Hailafanav asiyat mitzvah, the Talmud Torah, im afshar mitzvah lasod leasot al yedei achirim. This is leasot or leasot, means to be done. Yeah, let's say it's study Torah and a mitzvah, some other mitzvah. Yeah, but someone else could do the mitzvah. Yedei achirim lo yafsik mi talmudo. He shouldn't stop his studying. Ve'im lav yaseh mitzvah v'yachzor letalmudo. And if not, you should do the mitzvah. You know what happened? I think I showed you guys pictures. It happened in the summer. They needed someone here to dig a grave. I was on my way here late in the afternoon. It was around sunset time. And they said, look, there's a funeral in an hour. The usual people who dig the graves around here. We have a cemetery, unavailable. We need people to get down to the cemetery. So I grabbed my neighbor. I was the first one there. We start digging a grave. And the Rosh Kol himself, you've seen him here. He has this whole people in Chabura. He showed up and finished the job. And we finished digging that grave right as the procession showed up. Okay. So yeah, there were two people I know. Actually three of them, because we were a pair and my neighbor wasn't coming with me to the base medic. She wasn't on the way, so I grabbed him. But the other two guys who came, the Rosh Kol and the guy who was driving him, they were on their way here. So we could have said the three of us are definitely going to be in the base medrash now. This is our seder. But instead, we had to do this mace mitzvah. So We have to do what we have to do. Let me plug this in. Okay, so that's what you should do. Now let's see Mari Korkus. I think I like the Mari Korkus a little bit more than what I read in the Rabaz. Rabaz is good. It gave us the sources, right? So Rabaz is pointing out this has to do with Talmud Torah. That's why we have to make this critical distinction. On Shabbos, building the base of Mikdash, and on Yom Tov also, that's strictly forbidden. In Yom Tov, it's an Isser Malkus. On Shabbos, it's Isser Skila. But this whole idea that we don't build the base of Mikdash at night is not about Isser V'Heter. That's why there's such a loose standard of when night begins. It has to do with the fact of priorities, that you're supposed to have time to study Torah. Fine. He says here in Yud Beis, Ein Bonim. Now he says that the source is Shavuos Parak Beis, and then the editors put in, it's on Daf Tesvav. You see that? Ufar Kama de Brachos, Amru, Va'afal Pishin Railavar Perish, Dad Seis Klavim Yomku. Even though there's no proof exactly for the Rambam says, but Seis Klavim, until Seis Klavim, it's still daytime. Zechu Davar Vadachtu Si Mamlacha V'chule, or V'gomer. Nehemiah said regarding building the walls of Jerusalem, after the temple is complete, by the way, says we were working all day, at least from dawn until nightfall, and we were holding our weapons. You know, one guy had his, I guess, what building item he had? His trowel. Trowel's the thing used to lay the mortar between the bricks, and he had his spear in the other hand. Okay, and he says, "V'omer vayelanu Laila mishmar vayom l'macha." You hear that? Laila for mishmar, and the day was for malacha. See, Laila was mishmar. That means what? Nowadays you say like we're just guarding the walls, but you know what do they say when you learn extra night learning in yeshiva? What do they call it? Mishmar. Okay, and the day was when we were working. The mashmad yom l'macha hainu me'alot hashachar ad seil chavim. Fine. So there you have that, and he just points out that really that pasuk in Nehemiah is not talking about building the base of Mikdash. It's just a remez, I guess. And he points out, why don't we remember the Resh Lakish? Why don't we have children building the base of Mikdash? Why don't we say that the children also should help building base of Mikdash by day? They have to study. The world is only kept alive by what? The sound of Torah that's coming. Hevel pihem is just like the hot air coming out of their mouths. So it's not in English. Hot air means it's a bad thing. It means nonsense. But in this case, in the Hebrew idiom, it means their breath. Just the fact that they're saying Divrei Torah, maybe if they don't understand it, they're at this age, the children are just reciting psukim or mishnayos, right? But that's a merit for everybody else.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.